what's so great is our dreams are so possible, right? It's like
Absolutely.
these are not, we
Yes.
can do it. We can do it. And
Let me
our
say one thing
and they
about dreams.
transcend class.
Yes, it transcends it all. And this is what the oppressor seeks to do. And I see it all the time is to
Yep.
rob us of our dreams, our aspirations, our visions, our hopes. And so a
Yes.
form of revolution is to dream,
Yep.
right?
Wow.
And to dream is to love. To dream is to
Whew.
love.
This is a time of transition in America. For those of us working in city building and community development, this is a moment to be daring, to dream big, and speak the future we want into being. Our cities have talent and ideas. That's not the issue. The question is whether we will listen. We invited some great minds across cities to hear what they're thinking about their own work in this moment and how they're building what comes next. Shauen Pearce, a champion for equity and inclusion and ethical development. I saw her speak at a conference a few years ago and I said, that woman has to become my friend. She is an artist that hails from Chicago but is working in Minneapolis. Shauen, welcome to the Consulate.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And Yodit Mesfin Johnson is my big sister, an amazing human, a fierce advocate toward the liberation of Black folks. She is a sought after speaker and facilitator in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, working all over southeastern Michigan and these United States. Yodit, welcome to the Consulate.
Thank you, baby brother. Shaun, I'm so happy to be with you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you too.
We gotta start by saying happy birthday to Shauen Pearce. You're spending your birthday with us. Thank you so much for being here on your birthday.
Thank you for having me. You know, I love y'all, so this is actually a gift for me. Thank you.
We love you more. Listen, I want to ask you guys where we are finding you in this moment. It's been a tumultuous time, ups and downs, and we are still hard at work in the business of city building. But I really want to know from each of you, how would you describe where you are, your place right now in this space? Yodit, we'll start with you.
It's I'm in a bit of an existential crisis. I'll be honest. I'm tired. You mentioned the tumultuous time as I occupy this Black woman's body. We have. I am of the ancestral lineage of Black women who have been carrying the weight and the burdens of this country and this globe for eons. And I feel it, Orlando. I feel it in my bones. So I am physically in the occupied lands of the Taino people, also known as the U.S. Virgin Islands. I needed to get away
Mm-hmm.
and just breathe. And I can talk more about where I am in the work, but I just want to acknowledge that for me in this moment, sitting back, gathering myself, grounding myself, getting close to the water is where I am.
Mm. Shaun?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in a similar place, honestly, Yodit. I'm so glad that you opened and went there. I am in a place of reclamation and getting back to that wholeness. I was just messaging with some friends this morning, also Black women, and we were talking about the stress and yeah, 2020 has been exhausting, but if I'm honest, 2019 was exhausting, and so was the year before that, and 2021. For every celebratory moment we've had has also been a journey already. I started the year with a colleague. I was like, "Oh, Happy New Year! I'm claiming Happy New Year. I don't care what's going on. We're saying Happy New Year." And I love her. She responded and said, "Oh, I thought it was December 43rd." I was like, "Okay, that's real." So in this moment, I am deciding to be the fullest Black woman that I can be. To not let the job get confused with the work. And really being able to show up fully for myself, for my partner, for my community, and get back to my practices that I think were much stronger, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, of being still, actually talking with my ancestors, connecting with my friends and family more intentionally, even when I just want to sleep because I'm exhausted. Um, and in the Midwest, really celebrating, for me, celebrating what it means to be a nice, hardcore Midwestern gal. I love this part of our country. Um, I just do. That's where
Uh,
I'm at.
can you talk a little bit more about the delineation you just made about the job and the work and not getting the two
Mm.
confused? What an amazing
Yes.
statement, but I want to go a little deeper there.
Absolutely. The work. So I think about how, as a Black woman, as Black people, we can show up, one, in a country that was not designed for us to survive it, right? Was actually designed for us to labor and toil and then be erased from it. How to show up in these really bureaucratic systems and bureaucratic structures, whether it's working in government or nonprofit or in for-profit, again, not designed for us. And oftentimes the titles that we carry are the job. But for me, the work of liberation, the work of justice, the work of being Black centered, and then understanding that like when Black people get ahead, the world moves forward, is really where I'm at. It's like it's the thing that keeps me in the job when the job is actually not fueling my soul. It's the
It's the
thing
calling.
that
It's
it's
the
the
calling.
calling,
It's the
period.
calling. Yeah.
Period. Yeah.
Yes. It's the calling on our lives that, you know, the word says that we were knitted in our mother's
Yes.
wombs, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
for such a time as this, and yet the system of white supremacy, of grind culture, of paternalism works really to
And
erode,
patriarchy.
and patriarchy to erode that destiny, right? That purpose that's been laid upon our lives. And the history of that toil that you talk about is also been conditioned and socialized for us as well. And so for so
Mhm.
many Black bodied women, we identify our purpose not with that alignment to the creator, but with the amount of productivity, the amount of hours we
Mhm.
can put in on the
Mhm.
grind. That's the crisis that I find myself at the intersection of, is how do I live into that purpose and live?
Yes. Yes. And knowing that the work is actually living, right?
Yes,
The work isn't
Yes.
survival. The work is actually living. It's being
that's right.
whole in
That's
in
right.
the practice of life.
That's right.
Um, and anything that says otherwise actually should just be removed from our lives, because when we compromise ourselves, we don't get ahead.
And
The
not
work is
only
being
that, but
whole.
in the titles and the like, I find that people put titles on me to try to box me in.
Yes.
The conversation
Yes.
my friends and I are having is one around the acronyms that get used to describe, BIPOC and hugs
Mm-hmm.
and POC and
Mm-hmm.
BIWOC, right? And these ways in
Mm-hmm.
which even the work seeks to invisibilize us, right? And so, how
Mm-hmm.
can I take up space in a meaningful way, aligned with that purpose, right? And
Mm-hmm.
focus
Mm-hmm.
not on a title, not on an organization, but on, you know, really laying the groundwork for my children's grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that without confusing being humble with actually shrinking, with actually allowing yourself to be
Ooh, what a
invisibilized?
balance.
Come on
Yes.
now. Come
Like
on.
Yeah.
how do we do that? I mean, what's that label that's getting put on you? Like if you could pick one label that you're just like, this is not even worthy of conversation in regards to me. Do you have one of those?
I think the one for me, and it became a meme, which was really interesting, this last year, of check on your strong friends.
Mm,
I think that's a label that has been put on me, and also that I have, co opted, right, or adopted. And so for me, it's not so much shrinking, but being vulnerable and courageous enough to live in the truth of, you know, where we are, that I'm not always strong, that um, I don't buy into individualism. Our liberation is tied to a one another, our freedom is.
mm-hmm.
Can
How
you
about
Absolutely.
you?
can
How
you
about you?
all talk about uh what what your dream is for the future of the communities that you work in, live in, and serve. I think oftentimes the reason why I like asking this question is because I'm realizing that we don't often give space, number one, to voice our dreams, but we
Hmm.
often aren't asked, right? Especially as Black folks living with so many dualities. You all talked about being Black women, and really, Yodit mentioned it so eloquently, being saviors of the democracy, and
Hmm.
the pioneers of our family, and all of that. But do y'all have time to dream? And if you are dreaming, what's your dream? Shaun, we can start with you.
Oh, I'm a big dreamer. That's one of my healing practices these days is getting back to more dreaming. That's my honey in the background walking. Um, for me, this is about ownership. And I think that it becomes a dirty word for us, right? Especially as we think about land and about business and about what it means. But as someone who I mean, like, is several generations into this land in particular, and that has seen what Black people have experienced across the globe, because we're often not tied to things, we're often displaced from things. For me, it starts at ownership, and it's actually having space for my partner and I to have our healing practices back home in Chicago, frankly, to be able to have an herbal apothecary, to have a workout and fitness spaces for people to come, to have a retreat space for activists and strategists and people who are stuck in the bureaucracy to recenter themselves in order to go back into the work at
Yeah.
their jobs. It's also this I deeply, deeply look forward to the moments where that moment of connecting actually isn't scheduled, if that makes sense. So that's my dream. That's my dream, is to get back to that time where you go out and you see people sitting on their stoops. When people would just show up to your house and ring a doorbell or knock to see if you were home and not call first. To that moment where people did stop everything to help our elders at the grocery store, when the elders ate first and the kids ate next and the rest of us ate at the cookouts. That's my dream. It's really about reconstituting, reclaiming the most beautiful, I think, cultural practices that I certainly experienced, and probably you all experienced where you're from, being a part of a majority culture of people who are deeply, 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 deeply connected to each other and to the land. There's
Yodit.
much more, but
I mean, listen, especially around like this connectedness that we
mhm.
feel and that is intrinsic in us as Black folks. We are communal. But Yodit,
Yes.
I want to get to your dream. Tell us your dream, Yodit.
Listen, I got a rep for the D, okay? I'm from, I got a rep for Detroit. I'm Detroit all day long.
Yep.
And my dream, I mean, I grew up in such a affirming space. Everywhere I looked, there were examples of people, places, spaces, whether that was, I got to shout out a few, but this is not exhaustive. I can think about being on the giant slide at Belle
Yes.
Isle.
Yes.
I can
Yes. So can I.
I can think about the shrine of the Black Madonna.
Come on, Albert Clegg.
Going there. I
Yes.
can think about um, so many soul food restaurants, but I'm trying to in my old brain, the corned beef shop on Schaefer is going to elude my mind, but I can think about that. And then I grew up on 7 Mile, and I can the dry cleaners, the store owners, the doctors, my teachers, every administrator either looked like me or was so deeply invested in me that it created in me a decolonized mind. I came
Yes.
into the world believing that
Yes.
all things were possible. So my dream is that, and the product of, let me shout out them grandmothers, that mama and my daddy. Come on now, the product of folks who were fighting for our liberation. So I mean, my mother literally sang songs to me. I got a little girl so sweet, little Yodit, right? Like I knew love. That
Yep.
is That is my dream. That's my vision, is that our children and their children and their children. I done gave up a little bit on grown folks, y'all. I want our children
That's all right.
to experience that, right?
Yes,
That
yes.
sense of deep sense of belonging and
Hmm.
love that roots us not in the constructs of race or gender or the binary or our other identities, but just in you matter and you belong here. And I have seen time and time again a child thrive in that environment. That's what I want. That's what I want in our
Yodit,
places.
Can
what's
we?
so great is our dreams are so possible, right? It's like
Absolutely.
these are not, we
Yes.
can do it. We can do it. And
Let me
our
say one thing
and they
about dreams.
transcend class.
Yes, it transcends it all. And this is what the oppressor seeks to do. And I see it all the time is to
Tell it.
rob us of our dreams, our aspirations, our visions, our hopes. And so a
Yes.
form of revolution is to dream,
Yep.
right?
Wow.
And to dream is to love. To dream is to
Whew.
love.
How are you building toward realizing the dream that you so eloquently outlined? How are you building towards that?
Um, in a number of ways, I think the building is that alignment that Shaun was talking about, right? That it's not about the job, it's about the work. Specifically, the way that I'm building this year is I'm really excited that we're partnering with Deanna Van Buren, a Black architect out of Oakland, um, who is the founder of Designing Justice,
That's a.
Designing Space.
She's a friend to the consulate.
And it's not just Deanna, it's the entire team at Designing Justice, Designing Space that I've invited to help uh, the organization that I lead to reimagine the space that we're in. We happen to be physically located along the Huron River in our town, and also situated in what had been a historically Black, now gentrified part of Ann Arbor, Michigan, where we're headquartered. And something that had been weighing on my heart was how we tend to talk about, until recently, the experiences of Indigenous folks and Black folks as very distinct and linear, when there is a lot of interconnectedness, both in our struggle and in our oppression and in our liberation. And so I got thinking about what would it mean for us to design a space. I work in numerous industries, but really at the cross section of social justice and nonprofit community change. And our sector has become its own kind of industrial grind,
Yeah.
nonprofit industrial complex. Some people will talk about it, where there's no incentive to eradicate the social ills.
Yeah.
And really the incent is in perpetuating it, right? and
Absolutely.
so and so I've been thinking about what would it look like to have a space where we could bring, regardless of the designation of the entity, where we could bring together folks who are mission focused and really focused on how we transform our communities together. That is the real estate folks, but it's also tech, it's also the care sector, it's also, the public sector, it's the
Hmm.
creatives, it's the community, right? It's the healers, it's the gardeners. And so what I want to be working on in place right now is how to create that space where the folks in our community know this is where healing, this is where liberation, this is where freedom, and this is where justice can get rooted. And then the final thought on that end is that I'm really thinking about how do we use our institutional power and privilege to um, bring and to better resource mutual aid networks, cooperatives, folks that are on the ground doing activists, organizers, abolitionists, our comrades. How can I essentially leverage whatever influence we might have to get those resources to them? So that's what 2021 looks like. Now listen, It's December. What is it, Shaun? December 40th.
43rd. 43rd.
So, you know,
Karma caters really
2020,
good.
2020 taught me to just be open, right? And then you know the word tells us, tell God your plan so he can laugh at them. But that's where we at, you know, at this point in time.
Shaun, what about you? How are you
Oh,
building
love
towards
it.
the vision that you outlined?
Personally, I'm centering the self-care more, and realizing that it is such a grind. There were points where I was looking at the computer and the words were blurry, and I was just like this can't be it. Being up, 72, 48, like, and then tick up the hours with community as as certainly our city and then our nation was set on fire last year, was just exhausting, and it took a toll on me personally, spiritually, and physically. Um, Emotionally, it was actually kind of a relief. So that's interesting.
Mm.
So for me, it's having a little bit of a schedule, trying to go to bed closer to 10, get up closer to 6, get more than 3 to 4 hours of sleep, having that reflection, that meditation right away in the morning before I do anything. So waking up, doing a reflection, trying to hydrate in that first waking period, and then getting some sunlight. Actually, I'm not going to plug a product, but they look into the sun, as our native cousins and family members say. They go put their feet on the ground, even if there's snow, recharging the body, moving a little bit, having breakfast, and then getting on to my day, and realizing that in order to be present, I have to have that me space at the forefront so that I can be present in the rest of the work, and in the job later. And then in terms of the work, I've just been really unapologetic about saying, like, community first. Bureaucracy, I cannot be a part of, or even let bureaucracy continue to try to strangle our neighbors, our people. So really calling every healer I know, every um, you know, mostly business person I know, because a lot of them were impacted, nonprofit leader I know, and saying, look, I know y'all probably don't even necessarily want to work with each other. You used to competing in philanthropy, for grants and other things, but right now we need your expertise, we need your heart, we need you to show up. And like, I get that you might not trust the structure that we're all a part of, or that I represent some days, but like, you've known me, and I'm asking if we can build in trust. And so a few of us have gotten together, and we have 8 principles of practice, ranging from reimagining public spaces all the way to investing in entrepreneurs who are trying to invest in their community, holding those non-traditional businesses, those cottage industries center, to saying, look, this isn't just about building owners who may have lost property. This is about sometimes the business owner and the workers who were in those spaces who don't have alternatives. This is about the families who don't have pharmacies and grocery stores to get to anymore. And instead of prioritizing the foundations and the CEOs and the Fortune 500s and the mega nonprofit leaders, they're saying, look, I love y'all, but y'all are eating well. And we need the people who have actually had incredible solutions that have been ignored for generations to be at the forefront. And then I'm going to even more specific in a project that I'm working on, which is, I'm going to use a term that I know is politicized for some people, but ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. And there's a group of folks who are connected to a 48-acre plus redevelopment project, who have said that the first beneficiaries of anything that comes out of that redevelopment project that is on the Mississippi River actually has to be ADOS folks, particularly the folks who were actually pushed into that part of the land, and that they support everybody else. But like, folks have to have schools, access to control what happens in their community, et cetera. So I'm literally in a process with attorneys, community members, of all sorts, healers, business leaders, et cetera. And we're looking at, how as a people, across race and class, frankly, we can come together and say that, like, the Black experience in this country is unique, and that there is some recompense that is due. And we are going to start there, and everything else will follow, instead of the opposite, which typically is, we're going to kind of do something for the general group or for a geography, and then we hope that Black people will benefit. And it's been a really, really eye-opening experience to look at how the United States has crafted its classes, and like what it means to have race as a protected class, and how that sometimes actually is a challenge to having justice-centered policy. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And then I'd say that the third piece for me is about showing up behind the scenes for some of our nonprofits and others and really moving as many things out of the way as possible. Getting on the phone with foundation leaders and others and saying, look, I know they asked you for $200,000. They need the $200,000 without 20 more hours of work and without metrics that maybe applied to 2 years ago, because right now they need to be able to support their communities that they serve. Um, so that's been really helpful, just to be able to show up and then have a number of my peers, my neighbors say, Shauen, we need you to slow down and we need you to tap us in and to slowly start to get into a place where I'm like, you know what, you're right. Let me tap you in and let me tap out for a couple of days.
Uh, Yodit, what do you wish more people understood about building equitable cities?
I think it's a few things. It's one is vision. You know, several years ago, I did an urban consulate talk on what it meant to enter space with honor and reverence. And I think we've touched upon the beauty of a lot of what happens when we do that, right?
Mm-hmm,
As
mm-hmm.
Shaun said, when we are mindful of, the history of a community, right? When we are um, pulling in the elders, the grandmothers, the aunties, the entrepreneurs, the pie bakers, the visionaries. What I have noticed this past year in particular, more acute, but it's been present, is not only the lack of vision, but the lack of strategy.
Ooh, talk
There's a
about it.
lot of tactical and reactive, particularly this past year. I got to tell y'all a funny joke. I do a lot of anti-racism work, and I have to credit Bettina Love, Dr. Bettina Love, who said it, but it resonated so deeply with me. All the white folks been in book clubs, right? They done read
Yes,
all the books.
several. Cass for Black Lives Matter, the Black
I know
Liberation,
where you
the color
You
of
know where I'm
law.
going? Do you know where
how to
I'm
be
going?
an anti-race.
White
They book list
fragility.
got so colorful this past year.
Listen, and I'm glad,
I'm
thank
happy.
God for Isabel Wilkerson. Thank God for
Ibram
Ibram
Kendi,
Kendi. Thank
yes.
God for right. Thank God for these scholars, for Bettina. But I ain't got time, listen, to read all these books. You hear me? I'm busy living this life.
We don't gotta
And
read
so
about
then they read the
it.
book, and this is what the point I'm trying to make. They read the book, and the book says, listen to Black folks, right? Sit back and listen to Black folks. Then you conducting your anti-racism training or your talk or what have you, and everybody's like this.
They should have changed it
I'm
to read
like,
engage with Black folks. Follow Black folks.
listen, and so, and my point is how reactive it is, right?
Yeah,
That's not authentic.
Mhm,
legit.
The future
mhm.
is not some, cooked up formula. It's basic tenets of humanity. See me at the center of every one of the significant movements that we've had this past year, and for as long as from back to Reconstruction, the Civil War, et cetera, has been at the center of that. Do you see me?
Yes,
Do I matter? That is what equitable city development is a resounding yes. And not in words, not lip service. But when I walk in, I can feel that I'm welcome. You're not following me around, right?
hmm,
When I when I'm hired, you do not tokenize me. When I
hmm.
am working with your board, we're not upholding 20th century standards for governance in a 21st century model. When I say to you, as Shaun said, we need funding for this organization, it's not performative. I don't have to turn tricks for
Hmm.
you to give me your money that frankly sits in coffers that were built off of the extracted labor of the very communities,
Yeah,
oftentimes. Come
yeah.
on, that you're pulling from. We've got to get, we have this in us. We have this capacity for our humanity. We have learned these behaviors of oppression. We've learned these behaviors. And so, equitable cities to me look like vision, strategy, right? Collectivism, making sure that everyone has their needs met, not just the wealthy, not just the gentrifier, not just the one who can buy up and gobble up the space. And to that point, equity is not intended so that now black folks can have power and white folks lose it. That is not what we're after here, people. And not only that, we talk about our white brothers and sisters, but it's a whole lot of us walking around with internalized white supremacy and
We
acting
not
that.
ready for that
all day.
conversation because we
Come
look. We
on.
don't got enough
Look.
time. We don't got enough time. We gonna
I'm
have
just
to
saying
do
that
a
is the
part
Listen,
two.
conversation.
make the whole
Let's
planning department
go.
black. And if they ain't dealt with that, we're going to perpetuate the problems that have existed in every American city. And the answers that we have are in the community. When
That's
Shaun
it.
says, that's what, listen, trust me. I don't care what pedigree, what Harvard, MIT, whatever you got, good common sense a trumpet every time.
All
Go
day.
ask, go ask folk in community what they need to get out of poverty. They'll tell you.
And
And
honor
when they
that.
say, give them the money, put the cash in my hand, trust them and do that, right?
Yeah.
One quick story. Everybody was talking about what people were doing with their stimulus money. And we, other folks of color, trying to mandate what somebody else do with it. First of all, don't check me on what I do. I'm down in the Virgin Islands with my stimulus money. Not check that. I'm good and grown. I'm
Sounds
good
like
and
great
grown.
planning to me.
You don't be telling. Don't tell
How
me.
you gonna
Right? You
police
don't
how
tell
people
nobody
spend
what
their money?
when we ain't had a fair living wage ever, but let me tell you this story. So the magistrate in the court system says that when the first round of stimulus money came, they had people resolving tickets, business that they had in the court from a decade ago.
Yeah.
The highest uptick in that particular district court of handling your business, right? That had happened in
Years ago.
forever.
Yeah.
In years, right? Folks, like, trust us. Put the money in my hand. And if what I need is a vacation, daggone it, let me take a vacation. And if what I need is to settle up my ticket so I can get my driver's license, let me do that, right?
Yeah.
But that is
That's
what
so interesting. You say that,
I'm
Yodit.
telling folks what
Yeah.
freedom look like.
I chair a board of a local credit union here in the city of Detroit, and the amount of our charge-offs from accounts that had been like past due went down significantly. People were paying off what they needed to pay off. We know what to do with it. I completely agree. Shaun, what brings you hope?
Loving the people is very, very simple for me. When I think about what our ancestors have paid to be here, the way that so many of us show up today, um, the possibilities of the future, the changes, the shifts that we are getting to live in our lifetimes that maybe we never even imagined. For me, it all comes back to love. And if we are not truly loving the people, then I think there's no hope. But I will say that I think that hope can sometimes be toxic, because sometimes we can rest in the hope that something will happen and not necessarily put the action where it needs to be. So
Preach.
for me, it's love, and love is action. It's all of the little things that we do to reaffirm humanity for everyone around us, for ourselves, to be present, to be vibrant, to be whole human beings. And that means with all of our flaws, and to allow those people around us who sometimes make mistakes to be forgiven, to forgive ourselves, and to constantly, constantly, constantly keep our history center and all of that, so that we don't get confused about, where we're in this love period, we're practicing love, but we don't want to forget that there are forces that would have us think that we're not deserving of the love, and that we don't know how to put it, just like we don't, apparently they think we don't know how to spend our money when we get our stimulus checks. They also think we don't know how to love properly. And so I think we have to push that back, but just be very present in love, be very present in our interconnectedness with each other, and work toward the vision. figure out the vision and work toward it. Otherwise, uh, you know, it'd be a little bit of a challenge. So that's what gives me hope, that there's so many people around us who are incredible, incredible, loving people who are not trying to save their egos, but who are trying to love up on their community and see the greatness in everybody and hold people to account when they fall short of that greatness. But really doing that in the most compassionate, loving ways possible.
Beautiful. Yodit, what brings you
Yes,
hope?
love. Yes. Um, this little boy of mine.
Yeah.
But before I talk about him, can I say Amanda Gorman?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you
Can I
can.
Hmm.
say? Can I
Yes.
say?
Amanda Gorman.
I stand Amanda
That
Gorman.
those full lips,
Them braids,
that
that crown.
crown of
Come on.
braided nappy hair, that chocolate skin, that story of resilience and of what she came from, that naming her faith, that her the way she moves, her oh, that gave me hope amid some bureaucratic unity for all nonsense that ain't nobody trying
Mm,
to hear.
hmm.
Amanda
Hmm.
gives me hope, and so do both of you. I mean, I'm coming up on 50 years old, right? I'm in anti-phase. I got this beautiful son who God blessed me with, that he he is who anchors me. He's who slows me down. He said to me, "Mama, ain't you the boss?" I said, "Baby, I'm tired. I got a lot of work to do." He said, "Ain't you the boss? You ain't got to do the work, right? Take a day off and take a week off." We did, but not only that he has deep and loving relationships with people who love him and for who have various identities and ways of being, and you know way they show up in the world, and he's aware of that and he's conscious of that. So young people give me a lot of hope. In fact, it has been nothing but young people in the last
Hmm.
probably 5-8 years that have really stirred me, right? And I think
Hmm.
some of it is the for the young ones, it's the fact that the filters haven't been developed and the
Yeah.
brain isn't fully developed and the fearlessness, right? I mean, I couldn't put my body out in the protest this summer, but I was there, and I'm so grateful to our young people who saw that calling and stood for that. And then those that
Hmm.
maybe in their 30s, who um, wow, are you our ancestors dreams come true. And I got to shout out to our elders. I'm surrounded by a village of amazing mamas and grandmamas, but the young people really, I think that this has got to be a part of the rite of passage of entering 50, is that you really start to confront your mortality. I question whether or not the vision that I had at your ages will be made manifest on my watch. But I've also reconciled that it's more like a thread, right? A thread from the past, that's being carried into the future. And I trust that our young folk are going to do that. That's what gives me hope.
Hmm.
Your
Mm.
your D mess.
Orlando,
Yeah.
Yeah. What gives
what
you hope?
gives you
Oh,
hope?
y'all putting me on the spot. Oh wow. Okay.
Absolutely.
Uh, for me, it is simple. I started an ancestry journey this year, and was able to dig up some census records and some uh, uh, draft cards that my great grandfather filled out. His father, my great great grandfather, filled out, and I am a church boy. Grew up in the church, still am in the church, and my great great grandfather had on his census form minister. And I
Hmm.
remember as his occupation, everybody else in the house were farmers or sharecroppers. My great great grandfather, Frank, was a traveling minister. And I remember growing up and hearing elders in my family talk about their uncle who used to go and traveled throughout the South and preach, and people would come and hear him from all over the South. And when I went and did the work, I found out that I had a direct bloodline to that relative that they were speaking to, my great-great-grandfather. So what gives me hope from a man born in 1882 to a young man born in 1989, the same God that worked for him, a son of a slave, the same God that was able to give him the audacity to put minister and not farmer on his census form, it's the same God that loves me and that I'm serving today. That, for me right now, is the anchor of my hope. We gonna make it. We gonna be all right.
Yes, we are.
So,
Yes, we are.
Yodit Mesfin Johnson from the Detroit Ann Arbor area, Shauen Pearce from Minneapolis by way of Chicago. Thank y'all for joining the Consulate.